Here is the truth they never teach you in any academy of finance, in any institution of commerce, or in any gathering of men who speak of wealth as though it were a thing outside of themselves. Your money has no power over you, none whatsoever. Your bank ledger does not determine your worth. It does not define your destiny. It does not command your peace, your confidence, or your future. It is not a master. It is a servant. It is not a cause. It is an effect. It is not the source. It is a shadow. And yet, without ever questioning it, you have reversed this sacred order. You have bowed your inner state before a number. You have allowed a figure written on paper to dictate how you feel when you wake in the morning and how you sleep at night. You have handed your peace to a symbol and called that symbol reality. You look at your account and you feel fear. You look again and you feel relief. You look once more and you feel shame, hope, anxiety, or despair. And all the while, you never stop to ask the fatal question: who gave that number the right to rule my inner world? Who crowned it king? Who gave it authority over my emotions, my identity, my sense of self? The answer is as simple as it is terrifying. You did. Consciously or unconsciously, you placed it upon the throne of your awareness, and then you knelt before it. This is the great inversion. This is the hidden slavery. Not the poverty of the purse, but the poverty of the mind that believes the purse is the master. I tell you now, with all the certainty of one who has tested this law in the crucible of life again and again, the number you see is not reality. It is only the after-image of reality. It is the frozen echo of what you have already been conscious of being. It is yesterday's assumption hardened into today's fact. You look upon it and you think you are seeing the truth. In fact, you are seeing the shadow cast by your habitual inner state. You mistake the reflection for the face. You mistake the echo for the voice. You mistake the symbol for the source. And so long as you persist in this mistake, you will continue to feel dominated by what can only ever reflect you. Let me speak plainly, for this is the foundation upon which everything else rests. There is only one reality, and that reality is consciousness, not matter, not circumstance, not numbers written in a ledger. Consciousness alone is the substance of all that appears. What you call money is consciousness made visible. What you call wealth is consciousness arranged in one form. What you call lack is the same consciousness arranged in another. The forms differ, the substance does not. And because you have not understood this, you have spent your life trying to change forms while leaving the substance untouched. You rearrange the furniture of the room and wonder why the house itself never changes. You have been taught to think about money as though it were something separate from you, something external, something to be chased, captured, earned, or persuaded. You are told to pursue it, to hunt it, to follow it as a dog follows a scent. And in doing so, you confirm the very separation that keeps it from you. To think about money is to place it at a distance. To think about money is to say, it is there, and I am here. To think about money is to confess, silently and continually, I do not have. And the subconscious, which knows no language but that of feeling, accepts your confession as law and dutifully brings more of the same confession into form. But there is another way of thinking entirely, and it is the way the awakened man thinks. It is not thinking of a thing, but thinking from it. When you think from wealth, you do not imagine wealth as a distant prize. You experience it as your present state. You do not look toward it as a future possibility. You stand within it as a present fact. You see the world through the eyes of the one who already possesses. And I tell you, with the same certainty with which I tell you the sun will rise tomorrow, that when you think from a state, rather than of it, that state must clothe itself in the facts of your world. You have been taught to strive. You have been taught to struggle. You have been taught to labor under the illusion that effort creates abundance. And so you exhaust yourself rearranging effects while never once touching the cause. You move pieces upon the board, believing the board itself cannot be changed. You pray to circumstances, plead with chance, negotiate with luck, and all the while, the one power that actually creates your experience remains unrecognized, unused, and unknown. That power is your own awareness of being. When Moses stood before the burning bush and asked for the name of God, the answer he received was not a name you could write upon stone or utter as a sound. The answer was, I am. Not I will be, not I was, but I am. The eternal present awareness of being. This is the name of the creative power. This is not poetry. This is not metaphor. This is law. When you say I am, you are invoking the creative force of the universe within yourself. What you place after those two words is the decree that shapes your world. If you say, I am poor, you are not describing a condition. You are issuing a command. If you say, I am wealthy, you are not fantasizing. You are legislating. You begin to see now why the number before you has ruled you for so long. You gave it a name. You called it truth. You called it fact. You called it reality. And having named it, you bowed before it. But what you called reality was only the echo of your own prior assumptions. The world did not speak to you. You spoke to it first, silently, invisibly, through feeling, and the world merely answered. You have lived as though the effect were the cause, and the cause were the effect. You have treated money as though it were the master, and your consciousness as though it were the servant. You have reacted where you should have commanded. You have waited where you should have assumed. And because of this, you have known anxiety, fear, desperation, and the endless sense that you are at the mercy of forces beyond your control. This is the great deception. There are no such forces. I did not come to teach you how to earn money. I did not come to teach you how to chase it, store it, manipulate it, or fear it. I came to teach you how to reclaim the throne you abandoned. I came to teach you that you are not the subject of your world, but its author. I came to teach you that the power you have been seeking in conditions has always resided in your own consciousness. I am not here to teach you how to gain. I am here to teach you how to assume. I am not here to teach you how to struggle. I am here to teach you how to be. When a man truly grasps this, not as a pleasing theory, but as a living truth, something profound and irreversible occurs within him. He no longer trembles before circumstance. He no longer begs the world for permission to feel peace. He no longer allows tomorrow's uncertainties to poison today's awareness. He understands, at last, that he does not consult the world to discover who he is. He declares who he is, and the world arranges itself accordingly. You have mistaken the shadow for the substance. You have mistaken the echo for the voice. You have mistaken the reflection for the face, and because of that mistake, you have lived as a servant to your own creation. But the moment you recognize that your consciousness is the only reality, the moment you see that what you are aware of being must objectify itself in your experience, everything changes at once. The chains do not fall gradually, they vanish. You do not need permission from circumstances to be wealthy in consciousness. You do not need evidence before you assume. You do not need approval from the world before you claim your own identity. Consciousness does not wait upon proof. Consciousness precedes proof. What you are bold enough to assume with feeling is what the world is compelled to express. This is the forgotten law. This is the hidden key. This is the secret that has been buried beneath centuries of misunderstanding. I am not here to teach you to win the game of money. I am here to show you that the game itself is an illusion created by consciousness and sustained only so long as you give it power. The moment you withdraw that power and place it back where it belongs, within the I am that you are, money ceases to be a tyrant and becomes what it was always meant to be, a reflection, a tool, a faithful servant to your assumption. You have lived as though the world were shaping you. I tell you now that you have been shaping the world all along. Unconsciously, yes. Fearfully, yes. Habitually, yes. But shaping it nonetheless. And now that you are aware, now that you stand at the edge of this realization, the question is no longer whether you create. You always have. The only question now is whether you will continue to create by default or whether you will create by design. I am not speaking to you as a preacher. I am not speaking to you as a philosopher. I am speaking to you as one who has watched imagination take flesh, as one who has seen assumption harden into fact so many times that doubt no longer has a home within me. I am speaking to you as one who knows, not believes, that consciousness is the only cause, and that all things, including what you call money, are but its obedient effects. You feel enslaved because you reversed the order. You bowed to the shadow and forgot the light that cast it. But the light has not gone anywhere. It has never left you. It is your awareness of being, and the moment you turn back to it, the moment you reclaim it as the only authority in your life, the moment you dare to assume instead of react, everything that once seemed immovable begins to soften, to yield, to rearrange itself in quiet obedience to your inner decree. This is not a promise. This is not optimism. This is law, and law does not persuade. Law operates. The greatest deception ever whispered into the mind of man is this single, poisonous idea that wealth exists somewhere outside of him, that it lives in distant circumstances, in the hands of others, in future moments not yet born. From that one false assumption spring all waiting, all striving, all anxiety, all struggle. For when a man believes his good is somewhere beyond his own being, he condemns himself to a life of pursuit rather than possession. He becomes a seeker instead of a knower. He becomes a beggar instead of a creator. You were taught to wait for opportunity, to wait for conditions to improve, to wait for fortune to favor you, to wait for the right moment, the right contact, the right economy, the right season. And while you wait, life passes. You are taught to effort, to strive, to labor under the belief that exhaustion somehow earns abundance, that sweat purchases worth, that suffering sanctifies reward. And because you accepted this, you learned to associate money with tension, with pressure, with endless struggle. You were taught to believe in luck, that some are chosen and others passed over, that wealth descends randomly upon the fortunate and denies itself to the unworthy. And with that belief, you surrendered your power to chance. All three, waiting, effort, and luck, are born from the same illusion that money is outside of you, that it must come to you from somewhere else, that it must cross a distance to reach you. But I tell you with absolute certainty, there is no distance between you and wealth. There never was. There is only a difference of state, only a difference of consciousness, only a difference of what you are aware of being. Money is not a substance that lives in vaults and ledgers. These are merely its costumes. Money is a state of consciousness objectified. It is the echo of an inner assumption. It is the shadow cast by an inner conviction. It has no origin of its own. It issues only from what you are conscious of being. As the shadow cannot exist without the body that projects it, so money cannot exist in your world without the state that generates it. You do not draw money to you, you express it. You do not attract it, you outpicture it. You do not summon it from afar. You allow it to appear where it always was, within the substance of your own awareness. The man who believes wealth is distant creates a life of pursuit. The man who knows wealth is within creates a life of expression. The first forever chases. The second forever reveals. You see now why so many strive and so few rest. Why so many labor and so few enter peace. They are obeying a false map of reality. They are navigating toward a destination that never existed outside themselves. And because they seek without, they never find within. The world reflects their search with endless corridors of effort, but no arrival. You ask, where then is money, if not outside? I answer you simply, it is where all creation begins. It is in the I am. The consciousness of being is the womb of every form. Before wealth appears as coin, as asset, as possession, it exists as identity. Long before it is counted, it is assumed. Long before it is seen, it is felt. The visible comes last. The invisible always comes first. When you say I am, you are not merely speaking words. You are moving the lever of creation. The ancient scriptures did not err when they placed the name of God in those two simple words. I am is not a title. It is the creative engine itself. It is awareness before description, existence before condition, power before form. And once you attach any condition to I am, you set that creative engine in motion toward that end. If you say, I am poor, you are not describing a fact. You are issuing a decree. You are giving consciousness a pattern to follow. You are shaping the formless into an image that your world must then reflect. If you say, I am rich, you are not indulging fantasy. You are uttering the very command that life itself obeys. Men believe they manifest money. They do not. They manifest identity, and identity manifests money. This is the subtle distinction that changes everything. You do not manifest wealth as a thing. You manifest yourself as the one who has, and the world, having no choice, arranges itself to confirm what you have assumed yourself to be. The mirror does not decide what it will show. It reflects what stands before it. Consciousness is the face. Money is the mirror. You may curse the mirror for showing lack, but the mirror is innocent. It only obeys. It only reflects. Change what stands before it, and the reflection must change. How many times have you said, "When I have more money, I will feel secure"? How many times have you said, "When I am rich, I will be free"? With those words, you have postponed your freedom. You have postponed your peace. You have postponed your identity. You have declared without realizing it that you are not yet what you wish to be. And because consciousness obeys identity first and things second, life has faithfully kept your wealth in the perpetual future. The future is the great hiding place of all unclaimed states. Men hide their power there. They hide their confidence there. They hide their abundance there. And because they place it in tomorrow, today remains empty. Consciousness never creates in the future. It only creates in the now. The now is the only altar upon which assumption is fulfilled. Whatever you place in now begins to take form. Whatever you banish to tomorrow remains a phantom. Money is not withheld from you. You are withholding yourself from the state that would express it. You are not blocked by circumstances. You are blocked by the condition you will not dare to occupy. You are not denied by fate. You are delayed only by your own insistence on seeing wealth as something other than yourself. You think you must become worthy before you can be wealthy. You think you must prove yourself before abundance may approach you. You think there is some invisible tribunal judging whether you deserve to live in ease. These are all the offspring of the same ancient misunderstanding, that you and your good are two, that identity and substance are separate, that you must earn what you already are. I tell you plainly, you are not trying to get money. You are trying to remember who you are. And when you remember that, money becomes one of the easiest things in the world to express. The man who waits to be wealthy waits forever. The man who decides to be wealthy becomes so in the only place where becoming ever happens, in consciousness. From that moment on, the outer world becomes a series of confirmations rather than a series of obstacles. All effort that is aimed at getting what you are not yet conscious of being is strain. All effort that flows from what you are already conscious of being is natural. The first fatigues, the second empowers, the first begs, the second commands, the first pleads with conditions, the second reshapes them. Do you now see the beauty of this law? It frees you from the tyranny of time. It frees you from the tyranny of chance. It frees you from the tyranny of effort. It restores you to your natural position as cause rather than effect. When you assume, you are not demanding, you are declaring. When you feel, you are not hoping, you are accepting. When you live from the state, you are not pretending, you are remembering. The man who believes money is outside him forever negotiates with life. The man who knows money is a state within him simply speaks and is answered, not because the world favors him, but because the world cannot do otherwise. You do not manifest money, you manifest yourself as money. You do not create wealth as an object. You create wealth as an identity, and identity, once assumed, once occupied, once felt as natural, must externalize with the same inevitability with which a seed produces its own kind. There is no exception to this. There never has been. There never will be. There is a law operating in this world that is as exact as mathematics and as impartial as gravity. It is not moved by prayer in the way men understand prayer. It is not persuaded by tears, nor impressed by effort. It does not reward goodness, nor punish wickedness. It simply obeys consciousness. This is the law by which all things are formed, and by which all things are sustained. And until you understand this law, money will appear to rule you. But when you understand it, you will discover that you were always the ruler. The confusion of man has always been this. He confuses cause and effect. He kneels before effects as though they were causes. He bows to shadows as though they were substance. And money, more than almost any other symbol in human life, has mastered men through this confusion. They treat it as a cause. They fear it as a force. They chase it as a master. And yet money has no power of its own. It never did. It never will. It is an obedient servant that reflects, with perfect fidelity, the state of the one who beholds it. There is a strict and eternal separation between cause and effect that you must learn to respect. Consciousness is the only cause. The outer world is only effect. Your account ledger, your possessions, your income, your debts, these are not generating forces. They are generated, they are not authors. They are sentences written by your inner assumptions. And because men misunderstand this, they try endlessly to change effects while leaving the cause untouched. They spend their lives rearranging reflections while leaving the face unchanged. Now you may ask yourself, if this is so, why does money sometimes seem to resist me? Why does it appear to slip through my fingers? Why does it vanish just as it arrives? Why does it answer others and ignore me? The answer is simple, and it is mercilessly honest. It does not rebel against you. It reflects you. It does not obey your wishes. It obeys your state. It does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you assume you are. You may speak of abundance while inwardly dwelling in anxiety. You may talk of prosperity while secretly confessing unworthiness. You may visualize wealth while inwardly rehearsing fear. And the law, being impersonal, does not listen to your outer theater. It obeys only the inner conviction. It gives you not what you ask for with words, but what you accept as true of yourself in feeling. This is why it is written, and always misunderstood, to him that hath, it shall be given, and from him that hath not, even that which he hath shall be taken away. Men read this as cruelty. They read it as injustice. They read it as favoritism. They do not see that it is merely the statement of a law. Having and not having are not references to possessions. They are references to states of consciousness. To have means to feel oneself as the possessor. To not have means to feel oneself as the deprived. When a man has in consciousness, when he abides in the inward feeling of possession, more must be given, because the law cannot do otherwise. When a man does not have in consciousness, when he dwells in the feeling of lack, even that which he physically appears to possess must eventually dissolve out of his life, not as punishment, but as reflection. The mirror cannot contradict the face. Here lies the mystery that destroys the illusion of effort. Men believe they earn money. They believe they wrestle it out of the hands of life through labor, struggle, education, strategy. And while these things may be instruments through which the outer world rearranges itself, they are never the true cause. They are always the aftermath. The man who assumes wealth will be led naturally into the channels that express it. The man who assumes poverty will be led just as naturally into the channels that reinforce it. You do not work to become what you already assume yourself to be. You work because you already are what you assume yourself to be. The assumption always precedes the action. The state always precedes the movement. The inner command always precedes the outer event. The world never acts upon you first. It always answers you. There are those who labor endlessly and remain poor. There are those who labor lightly and remain rich. The difference is not in the labor. The difference is in the state from which the labor flows. One works from fear. The other works from fullness. One moves from desperation. The other moves from identity. One attempts to get money. The other simply expresses the condition of being money. This is the great illusion of earning. You do not earn abundance. You either express it or you do not. You do not struggle into wealth. You assume it and it unfolds. The vine does not strain to bear fruit. It abides in its nature, and fruit appears as a consequence. Effort is the language of doubt. Strain is the confession of separation. Labor that is born from lack multiplies lack. Action that flows from being multiplies being. You see now why so many exhaust themselves and so few live at rest. They are fighting the shadow instead of changing the substance. They are attacking the mirror instead of the face. They are rearranging effects while preserving causes. And because of this, they grow weary, disillusioned, cynical. They do not know that the world is not opposing them. It is obeying them with terrifying precision. There is a magnetism that belongs not to the coin, but to the state. States attract their own likeness with perfect accuracy. The consciousness of wealth pulls to itself experiences, people, opportunities, timing, and events that harmonize with wealth. The consciousness of lack pulls to itself delays, debts, losses, and barren seasons with equal precision. The universe is not arbitrary. It is mathematical in its obedience to assumption. You have felt this magnetism your entire life without knowing what it was. You have entered rooms where you felt welcome without knowing why. You have met people who favored you without cause. You have encountered doors that opened without explanation, and you have suffered the opposite as well. You have felt rejection without name, loss without logic, resistance without face. These were not accidents. These were confirmations of state. The money in your life behaves exactly the same way. It clusters around certain identities. It avoids others. It is drawn irresistibly to some and slips mysteriously through the hands of others. Not because of merit, not because of punishment, but because of correspondence. Money is a faithful servant. It dwells where its master dwells in consciousness. When you identify as one who earns, you place yourself beneath it. You become dependent. You make yourself subject to conditions. But when you identify as one who is, you rise above it. You become cause. You become source. You no longer beg life for coins. You speak life into form. This is why I say to you that the command is metaphysical. It is not psychological suggestion. It is not hopeful imagination. It is dominion restored. You are not persuading the world. You are ordering it through identity. The outer world rearranges itself because it has no independent will. It is the visible activity of your invisible assumptions. Men ask, if this is true, why do I not see instant change? And I answer, because identity is not changed by a single thought. It is changed by persistent occupancy. Just as you did not become who you are now in one moment, so you do not become who you wish to be in one fleeting act. You change by dwelling. You transform by residence. You assume by remaining. Every state seeks to remain as it is. That is its nature. The old identity resists displacement like a tenant who has lived too long in one house. It clings, it argues, it frightens, it conjures memories, it throws before you the evidence of yesterday as proof that tomorrow cannot differ. But yesterday has no authority except the authority you grant it. The past has no mouth except the one you give it through remembrance and belief. When you occupy a new state long enough, the old one dissolves without conflict. When you persist in being before trying to have, the world begins quietly to reorder itself around you. You may not see it at first. You may not feel it immediately, but the rearrangement is inevitable. The law is never idle. It operates even while you doubt it. This is why I caution you against making your faith conditional upon sight. If you only believe when you see, you will never truly believe. For sight is the shadow, not the source. Faith is not confidence in tomorrow. Faith is certainty in now. It is the calm knowing that what is assumed as real within must one day appear as real without. The man who waits for proof before he believes will wait forever. The man who believes before proof will eventually see. This is the iron logic of the metaphysical command. Assume and then see. Never reverse the order. Money seems to rebel only when you are divided within yourself. When you declare wealth, but privately rehearse fear. When you visualize abundance, but inwardly expect disappointment. When you speak prosperity, but secretly feel unworthy. The law will always obey the deeper voice, never the louder one. You cannot deceive consciousness with performance. You cannot charm it with words. You cannot seduce it with effort. It listens only to feeling. It responds only to identity. It obeys only the state that feels natural. That which feels artificial has no power. That which feels inevitable cannot be denied. You were taught to pursue money. I teach you to assume money. You were taught to earn abundance. I teach you to embody abundance. You were taught to labor for a future. I teach you to dwell in a state. The difference between these ways is the difference between slavery and sovereignty. The one who struggles is still seeking permission. The one who assumes has already declared ownership. The one who begs is uncertain of identity. The one who commands has already accepted it. You will discover that the moment you stop trying to get and begin to be, effort loses its bitterness. Work becomes an expression instead of a burden. Action becomes play instead of survival, and money follows not as a prize, but as a shadow. For you see now the final truth of this law. Money is not attracted by desire. It is summoned by identity, and identity never negotiates. It simply is. Now I shall take you from principle into demonstration, from law into living proof. For a law that cannot be illustrated is only philosophy to the mind of man. And I did not come to speculate. I came to reveal. These are not tales to entertain you. These are not fables designed to impress. These are living records of imagination made flesh. And I share them with you for one reason only, that you may know, beyond all doubt, that imagination does not attract, it orchestrates. There came to me a man who had studied these truths for some time. He had listened, he had agreed. He had nodded in quiet understanding. Yet his life remained unchanged. He was what the world calls broke, not merely short of funds, but inwardly resigned to shortage. One night, after a lecture much like this, something within him broke, not his circumstances, his obedience. He ceased to admire the law and decided to command with it. He resolved to test imagination deliberately, not with vague wishes, but with a specific end. He chose the 5-10 pool at the Caliente track. In this pool, one must select the winners of 6 consecutive races. The task is statistically absurd, but I tell you again, imagination is not bound by statistics. It does not consult probability. It obeys assumption alone. Each night as he lay upon his bed, he did not imagine horses running. He did not picture confusion, crowds, or chance. He went straight to the end. He imagined himself standing calmly at the track, sorting his tickets with the quiet certainty that they were winners. He felt the texture of the tickets between his fingers. He felt the deep, settled, knowing that the matter was already decided. Then, in his imagination, he saw himself at the cashier's window, receiving a substantial sum, which he placed beneath his shirt. He repeated this not once, but nightly. Not in strain, but in faith. For 3 full weeks he lived in this act. He did not discuss it. He did not question it. He did not revise it. He simply assumed it. And I tell you this, assumption persisted becomes fact. On the appointed day, he went to the track, and everything unfolded precisely as it had been structured within him. All 6 races came in exactly as required. Every one. The only deviation from his imaginal drama was that instead of receiving currency, he was handed a check for $84,000. Now listen carefully. This did not happen because he attracted luck. It did not occur because fate smiled upon him. It happened because his imagination had already decided the end, and life had no option but to conform. Every jockey, every horse, every official, every decision taken that day moved unknowingly in obedience to a drama written weeks earlier in the silent theater of his mind. After this lecture, another man approached me. He asked if this could be duplicated. I told him what I tell you now. Decide your scene. Make it natural. Make it final. And persist without compromise. He chose the same pool, and he imagined, not vaguely, but with precision. 1 month later, he returned and placed before me a check for $16,000, not by chance, by obedience. But he was not yet satisfied. He wished to remove all doubt from his mind. So he designed a second experiment. This time, not a single win, but a specific arrangement of wealth. In his imagination, he entered 2 separate banks. In one, he saw a balance of $10,000. In the other, $15,000. He felt the naturalness of these figures. He felt the quiet dignity of the clerks as they addressed him. He did not feel excitement. He felt ownership. Then he returned in imagination to his home and counted winnings from his race strategy. In his mind, he divided the total into 12 piles, 11 of $1,000 and 1 of $533. The total sum, in his imaginary accounting, came to $36,533. Morning, noon, and night, he enacted this inner scene, not as fantasy, as memory, as experience, as fact. 1 month later, he again went to the track, and something curious occurred. In making his selections, he inexplicably duplicated 2 tickets. At the 10th race, when the results came in, both of those identical tickets were winners. Each paid over $16,000. In addition, 6 consolation tickets paid out. The final amount totaled $36,788, within $300 of his imaginary total. Even more astonishing, at the end of the ninth race, one of the horses was to be scratched from competition. The trainer attempted to withdraw him. The officials denied the request. The horse raced and won. Thus the final thread required for the imaginal pattern was secured. Do you see what occurred? Do you truly see it? His imagination did not merely draw money toward him. It arranged the error of a duplicated ticket. It guided the denial of a withdrawal. It placed every man, every hand, every signature, every decision into precise alignment with a drama enacted in silence, weeks before. This is orchestration, not attraction. Attraction suggests passivity. Orchestration implies command. You do not lure life forward. You instruct it through state. I did not share these accounts to inspire hope. Hope is weak. I shared them to establish law. The same law that acted there is acting now. It does not change with time. It does not fade with generations. It does not weaken with disbelief. It operates equally for every man and woman who dares to assume. And now you may ask, why does this not happen for everyone? Because most imagine from desire, not from fulfillment. They imagine what they want to see, not what they would see if it were done. They rehearse lack under the disguise of faith. They pray from the wound instead of from the healed state. The man who imagines racing horses has not assumed victory. The man who counts winnings has. One stays in process, the other dwells in completion. Imagination does not require effort. It requires decision. It requires finality. It requires that you stop moving inwardly between states and dwell in one. The man who wins inwardly once will tend to win outwardly as a consequence. The man who defeats himself inwardly repeatedly will find the world confirming that defeat with heartbreaking precision. And now you understand. Imagination does not choose its symbols. It chooses its end. It does not negotiate paths. It dictates conclusions. Life is never random. It only appears so to those who do not know the source. There are men who listen to these truths and quietly excuse themselves by thinking, yes, this may work for the extraordinary case, for the gambler, for the dreamer, for the one who risks wildly, but my life is ordinary. My office is fixed, my position is sealed, my ceiling is real. And so I now take you from the racetrack to the silent corridors of commerce, from the crowd to the clerk's desk, from the visible drama to the quiet room where men imagine themselves into freedom. There came to me a man of serious manner and heavy countenance. He was the sort the world calls respectable. He wore responsibility like a uniform. His life moved by routine. He held a position in a rigid institution where advancement was slow, ceremonial, and governed by years rather than merit. He had reached what men call his limit. Above him were offices he would never touch, titles he would never carry, figures he would never sign. He did not speak of dreams. He spoke of ceilings. He told me, I am grateful for my position, but I am trapped within it. And I answered him, no man is trapped in a place. He is only trapped in a state. He did not understand me at first. He thought I spoke in riddles, but all men think in riddles when they look at effects and search for causes. He wished to be free of his present role, not by cruelty, not by competition, not by intrigue. He wished simply to rise, not violently, but inevitably. He wished to occupy a position that, by every visible measure, was beyond reach. So I instructed him not to rebel outwardly, but to ascend inwardly. Each night, as he lay upon his bed, he did not see himself filling out applications. He did not picture approval committees. He did not rehearse negotiations. He went straight to the end. He imagined himself seated in an office not yet his, signing correspondence he had never before signed, addressed by a title that was not yet his in the outer world. He felt the quiet dignity of the role. He felt the naturalness of authority. He did not feel excitement. He felt inevitability. Night after night, he returned to that one imaginal position, not as a visitor, as the rightful occupant. He did not say, "I will be." He said nothing at all. He simply was. And that is the secret that men seldom grasp. The imagination does not work through declarations alone. It works through residency. Weeks passed. Nothing appeared to change. His routine remained identical. The same corridors, the same desk, the same ceiling. But inwardly the man no longer lived there. Inwardly, that life was already over. He had relocated in consciousness. He had left the old state behind without fanfare. Then one morning, without intrigue, without effort, without manipulation, a communication crossed his desk. A higher position, one that had never been offered to his division before, had opened. The man who was expected to fill it declined. Another higher still was unavailable. And suddenly, without competition, without request, without preparation, the offer fell upon the one who had already accepted it inwardly. He did not petition, he did not pursue, he did not persuade. The door opened of its own accord. This is not a miracle. This is mechanics. The world did not promote him. His state did. The organization did not decide. His consciousness had already decided weeks earlier. The office he entered that morning had been occupied in imagination many nights before. And this is the lesson that destroys the final bondage of circumstance. You do not advance in the visible world. You advance in awareness, and the visible world rearranges to follow. We believe promotions require permission. In truth, they only require assumption. We believe titles demand approval. In truth, they only demand occupancy in consciousness. There are no unmoving structures. There are only unmoving identities. Men speak of glass ceilings. I tell you, there is no glass in the world thick enough to contain a thought that has ripened into belief. If the living word has spoken within you, no institution can refute it. If the feeling of authority has taken root within you, no hierarchy can deny it. The resistance men encounter is never from the world. It is from the contradiction they harbor between what they imagine and what they secretly expect. The outer world never says no. It only says as you are. This man did not rise because he impressed his superiors. He rose because he impressed his subconscious. He did not struggle through resistance. He dissolved resistance by removing the state that required it. When the identity of the lesser self died, the world had no role left for it to play. Another came to me, a man not in chains of routine, but in chains of fear. He feared loss. He feared collapse. He feared misstep. He remained safe by remaining small. He had been offered openings before and declined them because they seemed too large, too demanding, too dangerous. One day, he found himself in a narrowing world. Safety had become confinement. He wished to leap, but lacked courage. I did not tell him to manufacture courage. I told him to assume the state in which courage was unnecessary, the state in which he already stood upon the other side of the leap, secure. Each night he imagined himself having already succeeded in a risk he dared not yet take. He imagined explaining his success to a friend, not with excitement, with calm certainty. He did not imagine the climb. He imagined the view from the summit. 1 month later, an opportunity appeared that mirrored his inner assumption exactly, not as a gamble, but as a natural extension. The leap no longer looked like a leap, because he had already landed inwardly. And once again, I say to you, the world does not test you, it obeys you. There is no such thing as too far, there is only not yet assumed. Men believe growth is measured by distance. It is measured by residence. The moment you take up residence inwardly, in what you desire to be, the outer world begins at once to construct the bridge, but it will not build while you stand on both shores. The man who keeps 1 foot in the old identity and 1 foot in the new calls the gap impossible. The man who fully occupies the new identity calls the gap already crossed. You do not construct the ladder. You become the one who stands at the top of it, and the ladder appears. This is the perfect obedience of the law. It does not ask whether something is logical. It does not check whether something is deserved. It does not consult your history. It consults only your state. You rise not by climbing the world. You rise by changing the station of your own awareness. And when the state changes, the scenery cannot resist. There is an enemy that defeats more men and women than poverty, war, or misfortune combined. It makes ships sink before they ever leave the harbor. It strangles prayer before it reaches the invisible ear. It poisons assumption before it can take root. And the most dangerous thing about this enemy is that it speaks with your own voice. It is the silent dialogue you carry on within yourself when no one else can hear. I have watched people who knew every principle. They could recite the law with precision. They could describe the end as beautifully as any poet. They could close their eyes and visualize scenes of abundance with perfect clarity. And yet their lives remained unchanged. Year after year, the world continued to mirror lack back to them with merciless faithfulness. They would come to me confused, wounded in their spirit, asking why imagination did not answer them. And so I would ask them a question no one ever thinks to ask. What do you say to yourself when the lights are out and the world grows quiet? For the true prayer of a man is not what he says on his knees, it is what he mutters under his breath in the secrecy of his own mind. There was a woman who came to me years ago. She was sincere. She hungered deeply for freedom from financial fear. She practiced visualization daily. She imagined new homes, new clothing, new freedoms. She had attended lectures. She had taken notes. And yet, though months passed, her circumstance did not move. She remained bound to the same narrow life. One afternoon, after listening quietly, I asked her to speak out loud the natural thoughts that arose when she considered money throughout the day. At first she resisted. She told me what she hoped, what she wanted, what she prayed for. But I pressed her. I did not ask what she hoped. I asked what she said. At last, with trembling voice, the truth emerged. It never lasts. It always runs out. Something always goes wrong. I'm afraid to need too much. It's safer not to want too much. These were not thoughts, she shouted. These were thoughts she lived in, and the law had answered them with perfect precision. You see now why imagination appeared not to work for her. Her waking prayers were of abundance. Her deeper confessions were of fear, and consciousness, being exact and impersonal, answered the deeper voice. The world does not hear your affirmations. It hears your agreement. It hears what you accept as natural. It hears the tone of belief beneath the sound of your words. You may declare wealth 100 times a day, but if one fearful confession is made with true feeling, that single confession outweighs the 100 rehearsed phrases. This is the tragedy and the beauty of the law. It is tragically unforgiving of inconsistency, and it is beautifully obedient to truth. The woman had been praying to abundance with her lips, and confessing poverty with her identity. She split herself in two, and the law, which does not arbitrate between masks and faces, chose the face. I asked her then to perform a simple act, more difficult than all the visualizations she had ever attempted. I asked her to become conscious of her silent speech, not to fight it, not to suppress it, only to listen, to observe herself as she would observe another, to hear the phrases that rose like ghosts throughout her day. For one full week, she kept this inward watch, and what she discovered shook her to tears. The inner voice that guided her life was not a voice of power. It was the voice of a frightened child rehearsing scarcity as if it were prophecy. Once she saw it, she could no longer deny it. And now the greater work began. Not the work of begging the world for wealth, but the work of replacing the narrator of her life. I told her, you do not change reality by force. You change it by substitution. You substitute one inner story for another, one confession for another, one identity for another. The battle is never outside. It is always in the tongue of the silent mind. Each time the old phrase appeared, it won't be enough. She was not to argue with it. She was to replace it. Gently, calmly, not in panic, with authority. There is always more than enough. At first the new phrase felt artificial. The old one felt natural. And this is the surest sign that identity is shifting. What feels natural today was once artificial. And what feels artificial today is only future habit rehearsing itself. For weeks, she practiced this inward substitution, not perfectly, not heroically, but persistently. And I tell you this truth, the world did not change before she did. Her fear softened first. Her anxiety loosened its grip first. Her sleep deepened first. Her breathing changed first. And only afterward did the world begin to rearrange, Within weeks, opportunities she had never planned for entered her life. Assistance arrived from unexpected places. Doors she had long cursed as closed opened without announcement. Not because she had impressed the world, but because she had ceased to impress fear upon herself. Here is the great secret that escapes nearly everyone. The subconscious does not respond to what you say to the world. It responds to what you say to yourself about the world. Your inner dialogue is the script your life performs. Men imagine that their fate is written in contracts, in debts, in laws, in conditions. It is written in sentences, not sentences spoken to others, sentences whispered inwardly in the privacy of awareness. It is not necessary that you be conscious of every imaginal act. Most of your creation happens without effort, simply because you habitually occupy certain inner tones. Rehearsed worry becomes a command. Rehearsed doubt becomes a prophecy. Rehearsed fear becomes environment. The silent voice is the true ruler. You may kneel in churches and speak of faith, yet rise with disbelief in your inner speech and cancel your own prayer before it ever leaves your being. You may visualize abundance with your eyes closed and undo it with one whispered confession when the eyes open again. I tell you plainly, your account does not obey your outer declarations. It obeys your inward agreements. It listens to the tone you set within yourself when no one else is present. The reason so many feel betrayed by the law is because they never actually practiced it. They admired it. They spoke of it. They studied it. But they never governed the one place where creation happens. To replace the inner voice is to replace the future. And this replacement cannot be violent. It cannot be hysterical. The subconscious yields to calm authority, not to frantic struggle. You do not wrestle the old self out of power. You starve it by no longer feeding it with belief. Every time you feel the old fear and choose not to agree with it, you weaken its authority. Every time you feel the new assumption and allow it to remain without argument, you strengthen its rule. And soon, without drama, without spectacle, the inner throne changes occupants, and then something astonishing happens. The world begins to speak differently to you. People address you with a new tone. Circumstances approach you from a new angle. Events organize themselves with a logic you did not design, but you did authorize. The woman I spoke of did not manifest money by forcing images. She manifested a new self who no longer feared absence. And money, which always mirrors identity, had no choice but to follow. This is the final truth of this chapter, and it is both simple and terrible in its exactness. Your inner dialogue is never neutral. It is always either creating or canceling, always either blessing or binding, always either planting or uprooting. And the world, with unblinking fidelity, obeys it. If you would truly understand money, you must move beyond money. You must step beyond the symbol and enter the substance. For money, like every other form in your world, is only the outermost skin of a far deeper reality. Nothing exists outside of consciousness. There is no independent world out there moving by its own authority. There is no substance that is not first an idea. There is no form that was not first a feeling. Consciousness is not a visitor in the world. The world is a visitor in consciousness. Men believe they walk upon the earth as though it were solid, fixed, external. Yet every night, without resistance, without argument, they step into another world just as vivid, just as convincing, just as real, while it lasts. In that dream, they walk, speak, touch, fear, rejoice, spend, lose, and gain. While the dream endures, it feels as real as this waking state. Only when they awaken do they say, "It was only a dream." And still they fail to see that this waking world is also a dream, only one which you have agreed to stabilize. The night dream dissolves quickly because you do not continually return to it with remembrance. The waking dream persists because you remember it, rehearse it, reinforce it, and agree with it incessantly. The world you call physical is not more real than the dream world. It is only more persistent because it is more constantly assumed. Do you now see how far this truth goes? If the world is dreamlike in nature, then your account ledger is also dreamlike. Your possessions are dreamlike. Your debts are dreamlike. Your limitations are dreamlike. They are not fixed entities imposing themselves upon you. They are assumptions you have clothed with form and agreed to call solid. Your bank account is not a tyrant, it is a crystallized thought. It is a habit of consciousness slowed down into figures and columns. It is yesterday's inner speech written in numbers today. You look at it and think you are seeing money. In truth, you are seeing memory. The illusion of the external world is the most convincing illusion you will ever know. It persuades you that change must move from without to within. It convinces you that events must happen first, and feelings may follow. It insists that security must precede peace, that money must precede confidence, that proof must precede faith. And in believing this, man reverses the law and condemns himself to endless pursuit. But the true order is always inward to outward. Feeling first, form last, identity first, expression last, false consciousness first, koin last. The world you touch with your hands existed first, as a state you touched with your feeling. The chair you sit upon existed first, as an assumption of its builder. The house that shelters you lived first in imagination. The money you handle lived first in awareness. There is no exception. Men speak of objective reality as though it were independent. I tell you, it is nothing but subjectivity made visible. It is consciousness slowed to the speed of appearance. It is the inner world held long enough to become the outer world. If you could see the process, you would never again fear circumstance. You would see assumptions thickening into facts. You would see feelings condensing into forms. You would see identities shaping environments. What you call matter is only spirit slowed to visibility. When you grasp this, the tyranny of appearances begins to dissolve, for you realize that nothing you see is final. Nothing you touch is ultimate. Nothing you fear is permanent. Everything is an arrangement of awareness, and awareness is movable. The world appears fixed only to the one who refuses to move his own state. The dream of poverty feels solid because it has been dreamed consistently. The dream of wealth feels distant because it has not yet been lived inwardly with the same loyalty. You do not awaken by changing the scene. You awaken by realizing you are the dreamer. This is why I say to you, with unwavering certainty, you are not in the world. The world is in you. You are not inside circumstance. Circumstance is inside your awareness of being. And the moment you truly receive this, not as a pleasing idea, but as a living realization, fear begins to lose its authority. For what is there to fear if all that troubles you is your own shadow? What enemy terrifies you if all opposition is self-reflected? What limitation can bind you if all barriers are born of assumption? The man who believes the world is external lives as a victim. The man who knows the world is internal lives as a creator. And creators do not beg creation. They shape it. You may say, but my world feels so solid. Of course it does. Dreams always do while you are dreaming them. The dream does not feel like a dream until you awaken. And awakening is not the destruction of the dream. It is the recognition of authorship. This is not denial of the senses. It is dominion over the cause of the senses. The world does not disappear when you awaken. It obeys. This is why the mystics of all ages spoke in riddles. They were not evasive. They were pointing to a truth that collapses language. They said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. They did not mean inside the body. They meant inside consciousness. They meant inside awareness. They meant inside identity. Money, like every other form, is simply one of the many shapes the kingdom takes when filtered through your assumptions. If you understand this, you stop fearing money. You stop worshipping it. You stop resenting it. You stop chasing it. You stop hiding from it. And in that very release, it begins to flow differently. For fear constricts the channel. Worship distorts it. Resentment poisons it. Chasing scatters it. Only identity harmonizes it. You do not change your wealth by fighting your bank book. You change it by awakening from the belief that the bank book is the cause. The outer world says, prove it, and then I will believe. The inner law says, believe it, and then I will prove it. These two orders can never agree. You must choose which you will obey. To live by the senses is to live by shadow. To live by assumption is to live by substance. The senses will always show you what has already been arranged. They cannot show you what is being arranged now. They report the past. Feeling designs the future. If you look at your account and feel despair, you are designing more despair. If you look at the same figures and quietly assume abundance in spite of them, you are designing abundance in defiance of them. Both experiences will feel equally real in the moment, but only one will be creative. You cannot judge the dream from within the dream. You must awaken within it. And awakening begins not with rejection of the world, but with reinterpretation of it. The world is not enemy, it is evidence. It is not obstacle, it is outcome. It is not tyrant, it is testimony. It is saying back to you, with perfect impartiality, this is what you have been conscious of being. And when you hear that message without resentment, without shame, without despair, you have taken the first true step into mastery. The outer world is the slow handwriting of your inner speech. The body is the slow sculpture of your feeling. The bank account is the slow ledger of your identity. Nothing is fixed, nothing is final, nothing is outside. If you would truly understand money, you must move beyond money. You must step beyond the symbol and enter the substance. For money, like every other form in your world, is only the outermost skin of a far deeper reality. Nothing exists outside of consciousness. There is no independent world out there moving by its own authority. There is no substance that is not first an idea. There is no form that was not first a feeling. Consciousness is not a visitor in the world. The world is a visitor in consciousness. Men believe they walk upon the earth as though it were solid, fixed, external. Yet every night, without resistance, without argument, they step into another world, just as vivid, just as convincing, just as real, while it lasts. In that dream, they walk, speak, touch, fear, rejoice, spend, lose, and gain. While the dream endures, it feels as real as this waking state. Only when they awaken do they say, "It was only a dream." And still, they fail to see that this waking world is also a dream, only one which you have agreed to stabilize. The night dream dissolves quickly because you do not continually return to it with remembrance. The waking dream persists because you remember it, rehearse it, reinforce it, and agree with it incessantly. The world you call physical is not more real than the dream world. It is only more persistent, because it is more constantly assumed. Do you now see how far this truth goes? If the world is dreamlike in nature, then your account ledger is also dreamlike. Your possessions are dreamlike. Your debts are dreamlike. Your limitations are dreamlike. They are not fixed entities imposing themselves upon you. They are assumptions you have clothed with form and agreed to call solid. Your bank account is not a tyrant. It is a crystallized thought. It is a habit of consciousness slowed down into figures and columns. It is yesterday's inner speech written in numbers today. You look at it and think you are seeing money. In truth, you are seeing memory. The illusion of the external world is the most convincing illusion you will ever know. It persuades you that change must move from without to within. It convinces you that events must happen first, and feelings may follow. It insists that security must precede peace, that money must precede confidence, that proof must precede faith. And in believing this, man reverses the law and condemns himself to endless pursuit. But the true order is always inward to outward. Feeling first, form last, identity first, expression last, consciousness first, coin last. The world you touch with your hands existed first, as a state you touched with your feeling. The chair you sit upon existed first, as an assumption of its builder. The house that shelters you lived first in imagination. The money you handle lived first in awareness. There is no exception. Men speak of objective reality as though it were independent. I tell you, it is nothing but subjectivity made visible. It is consciousness slowed to the speed of appearance. It is the inner world held long enough to become the outer world. If you could see the process, you would never again fear circumstance. You would see assumptions thickening into facts. You would see feelings condensing into forms. You would see identities shaping environments. What you call matter is only spirit slowed to visibility. When you grasp this, the tyranny of appearances begins to dissolve. For you realize that nothing you see is final. Nothing you touch is ultimate. Nothing you fear is permanent. Everything is an arrangement of awareness. And awareness is movable. The world appears fixed only to the one who refuses to move his own state. The dream of poverty feels solid because it has been dreamed consistently. The dream of wealth feels distant because it has not yet been lived inwardly with the same loyalty. You do not awaken by changing the scene. You awaken by realizing you are the dreamer. This is why I say to you, with unwavering certainty, you are not in the world. The world is in you. You are not inside circumstance. Circumstance is inside your awareness of being. And the moment you truly receive this, not as a pleasing idea, but as a living realization, fear begins to lose its authority. For what is there to fear if all that troubles you is your own shadow? What enemy terrifies you if all opposition is self-reflected? What limitation can bind you if all barriers are born of assumption? The man who believes the world is external lives as a victim. The man who knows the world is internal lives as a creator. And creators do not beg creation. They shape it. You may say, but my world feels so solid. Of course it does. Dreams always do, while you are dreaming them. The dream does not feel like a dream until you awaken. And awakening is not the destruction of the dream. It is the recognition of authorship. This is not denial of the senses. It is dominion over the cause of the senses. The world does not disappear when you awaken. It obeys. This is why the mystics of all ages spoke in riddles. They were not evasive. They were pointing to a truth that collapses language. They said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. They did not mean inside the body. They meant inside consciousness. They meant inside awareness. They meant inside identity. Money, like every other form, is simply one of the many shapes the kingdom takes when filtered through your assumptions. If you understand this, you stop fearing money. You stop worshipping it. You stop resenting it. You stop chasing it. You stop hiding from it. And in that very release, it begins to flow differently. For fear constricts the channel. Worship distorts it. Resentment poisons it. Chasing scatters it. Only identity harmonizes it. You do not change your wealth by fighting your bank book. You change it by awakening from the belief that the bank book is the cause. The outer world says, prove it, and then I will believe. The inner law says, believe it, and then I will prove it. These two orders can never agree. You must choose which you will obey. To live by the senses is to live by shadow. To live by assumption is to live by substance. The senses will always show you what has already been arranged. They cannot show you what is being arranged now. They report the past. Feeling designs the future. If you look at your account and feel despair, you are designing more despair. If you look at the same figures and quietly assume abundance in spite of them, you are designing abundance in defiance of them. Both experiences will feel equally real in the moment, but only one will be creative. You cannot judge the dream from within the dream. You must awaken within it, use and awaken within it. And awakening begins not with rejection of the world, but with reinterpretation of it. The world is not enemy. It is evidence. It is not obstacle. It is outcome. It is not tyrant. It is testimony. It is saying back to you, with perfect impartiality, this is what you have been conscious of being. And when you hear that message without resentment, without shame, without despair, you have taken the first true step into mastery. The outer world is the slow handwriting of your inner speech. The body is the slow sculpture of your feeling. The bank account is the slow ledger of your identity. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is final. Nothing is outside. There is a wound in the human soul that wears many disguises, but beneath all of them, it speaks a single sentence, I am not worthy. This is the hidden root from which much of poverty grows. Not the poverty of the purse alone, but the poverty of allowance, the refusal to permit oneself to receive what life is ready to give. Men believe their struggle is with circumstance. It is not, it is with worthiness. They believe their battle is with money. It is not, it is with permission. Somewhere, quietly, invisibly, they have decided that a certain level of suffering is appropriate for them, that a certain degree of deprivation is honorable, that ease must be earned through pain, that abundance is suspicious, that comfort is dangerous, that joy must be rationed. This is the moral trap of poverty, not the absence of coins, but the belief that lack makes one virtuous. I have met men who would rather suffer than feel guilty for prospering. I have met women who unconsciously sabotage their own good the moment it exceeds the invisible line of what they believe they deserve. They do not destroy their wealth with anger. They destroy it with conscience. They have learned somewhere in childhood or culture or creed that sacrifice is holy, that denial is noble, that struggle is proof of goodness. And so, when abundance approaches, they feel unclean. When ease presents itself, they feel undeserving. When joy arrives, they look over their shoulder for punishment. And the law, being faithful and impartial, answers not what they speak aloud, but what they secretly agree to about themselves. So they lose money, not because they are unlucky, but because they cannot live at peace with having it. This is the most tragic inversion of all. They do not fail because they are unworthy. They feel unworthy because they are about to succeed. There comes a moment when the old identity can no longer contain the new state. The vessel cracks, the limits ache, the mind trembles, and at that threshold, some turn back. Not because they cannot advance, but because advance demands the death of the familiar self. The fear is not truly of money, it is of transformation. If wealth enters your life fully, you will not remain who you are. That is the unspoken terror. You will speak differently, choose differently, relate differently, move differently. The world will mirror you differently. Old agreements will dissolve. Old hierarchies will reshuffle. Old roles will vanish. And so the frightened self whispers, better to remain small and known than large and unknown. Misery that is predictable feels safer than freedom that is undefined. Men cling to their familiar chains because they know their weight. Freedom terrifies because it has no script. This is why some return again and again to pain, even after tasting deliverance. Pain at least tells them who they are. Freedom asks them to find out. The new identity is frightening, not because it is cruel, but because it is empty of reference. The old life, though heated with suffering, is warm with habit. The new life, though bright with promise, feels cold with uncertainty. And so they sabotage the moment of expansion with strange accidents, impulsive decisions, reckless gestures, unconscious reversals. Not because they wish to fail, but because they do not yet know how to live as the one who succeeds. They do not trust themselves with abundance. The poor man feels safe in shortage because he knows how to survive there. The wealthy state demands a different posture, a different breath, a different sense of self. And these differences feel like loss to the old identity. The man you have been must die for the man you are becoming to live. And the man you have been will not depart without pleading his case. He will remind you of your past failures. He will parade your mistakes. He will summon your lineage. He will whisper your history as if it were prophecy. He will say, people like us do not live like that. And if you believe him, the myth becomes law. The fear of freedom is more binding than the fear of poverty. For poverty allows you to identify as good through suffering. Freedom forces you to discover goodness without bleeding. Many do not know who they are without their wounds, and so they keep the wound. And so I say to you now, gently, firmly, without accusation, you must give yourself permission to possess what you once only dared to dream. You must release the loyalty you have unknowingly pledged to limitation. You must forgive yourself for wanting more. There is no virtue in lack. There is no holiness in hunger. There is no sanctity in struggle. These are not crowns. They are cages. Abundance does not corrupt the soul. It reveals it. If a man becomes cruel with wealth, it is because cruelty lived in him before wealth arrived. Money did not create it. It uncovered it. And if a man becomes generous with wealth, it is because generosity slept in him before wealth awakened it. Money magnifies. It does not invent. And so the fear that wealth will turn you into someone unrecognizable is unfounded. It will only show you who you already are. You will not lose your soul by prospering. You will lose your illusions about it. This is why I say that freedom asks more courage than poverty ever demanded. Poverty only asks endurance. Wealth asks self-honesty. Many fear that if they rise, others will resent them. In truth, what they fear is leaving the tribe of the suffering. They fear standing apart from the circle of shared complaint. They fear being the one who no longer marches to the drum of lack. And this fear can feel like betrayal. But I tell you this, no soul is meant to remain in the valley forever. You do not dishonor those you leave behind by rising. You dishonor yourself by refusing to do so. Your expansion does not shrink the world, it enlarges it. Those who wish to follow will be lifted by your example. Those who do not will be confirmed in their choice. Both outcomes are lawful, neither are your burden. You do not carry the responsibility to remain small, so that others may feel comfortable. You are not tasked with preserving misery out of loyalty. The law calls you upward, always. And when the old voice whispers, "Who are you to live like this?" you must answer, not with argument, but with assumption. You must live as though the answer has already been given. Worthiness is not proven, it is accepted. You are not made worthy by success. You succeed because you accepted worthiness. This is the final snare before liberation. The request for permission that no one but you can grant. Once you grant it, silently, inwardly, without announcement, the world will begin immediately to collaborate with your decision. Not because the world suddenly loves you, but because it always obeyed you. Now we arrive at the place where all understanding must clothe itself in action. For knowledge that is not lived becomes only ornament, and truth that is not practiced becomes memory. The law is not impressed by admiration. It answers only assumption. And so I give you not philosophy, but form, not theory, but doorway. You do not change your world by force. You do not bend reality by struggle. You impress it by state. And the first and most gentle hammer with which to shape the invisible is the scene you enter at night. Each evening, before the body loosens its hold on the senses, before the will relaxes into sleep, you are invited into the single most fertile field of creation. The mind at that hour is neither fully waking nor fully dreaming. It is plastic, it is receptive, it is priest and altar in one. At that hour, you do not beg. You do not affirm in desperation. You do not recite in hope. You assume. You bring before the inner eye one simple scene, never the process, never the effort, never the road, but the accomplished fact. You see the balance as settled truth. You feel the weight of relief in your chest. You feel the quiet that follows fulfillment, not excitement. Excitement implies surprise. Surprise implies doubt. You enter instead the calm that follows certainty. You linger in this feeling. You let it wrap around your breath. You let it press gently upon your nervous system until the body accepts the state as familiar, and you fall asleep in that assumption, as one might fall asleep in a bed they own. Sleep then becomes not escape, but seal, night after night the same. No drama, no bargaining, only occupancy. This is not repetition to persuade the universe. It is repetition to naturalize the identity. You do not convince reality. You convince the self that must wear it. But this alone is not enough if the day contradicts the night. The day is the battlefield of habit, sacred. The night plants, the day either protects or uproots. For every man is always praying, whether he knows it or not. And his prayer is not what he says aloud. His prayer is what he allows himself to whisper inwardly without correction. The inner voice is the true scripture. It speaks when no ear is listening. It judges when no tribunal is present. It assigns value when no market is open. And this silent liturgy is the one the world obeys. You may kneel in churches and temples, yet curse yourself in silence, and the curse will prove stronger than the hymn. So I tell you this with gravity and with compassion. You must become the watchman at the gate of your own speech, not harshly, not violently, but steadfastly. When the old voice rises and says, "It is not enough," you do not argue, you replace it. When it whispers, "I cannot," you do not negotiate, you overrule. When it sighs, "This will fail," you do not entertain. You deny it entry, not with tension, with authority. At first, this will feel unnatural. Of course it will. You are attempting to speak a new self into existence, and the old self will protest with familiarity, but persist. The inner voice, like a reed, bends to repetition. Within weeks, what once felt artificial becomes automatic, and the world, patient mirror that it is, begins to echo the new tone. Gratitude then becomes not courtesy, but anchor. Not gratitude for scraps, not gratitude mixed with pleading, but gratitude from possession. You do not give thanks because you hope to receive. You give thanks because you have already accepted. You walk through the day not as one waiting for proof, but as one acknowledging evidence that is forming unseen. You thank before the gift arrives, as a gardener thanks the soil before the harvest. This gratitude dissolves desperation from the nervous system. It removes the stench of need from the request. It tells the subconscious the order has been filled, and the subconscious obliges. Then there is the voice that speaks, not merely inward, but outward, spoken not to people, not to air, but to the symbol itself. You may look upon the account, the purse, the ledger, the place where the echo of your state rests, and you may address it not as master, but as servant, not in fear, in sovereignty. You say not with threat, but with law. You are not separate from me. You have no will of your own. You obey the state I authorize. I now authorize abundance as my natural state. And you will conform because you must. You do not speak to awaken the number. You speak to awaken yourself. Then there is the holy experiment of the day. One day set aside each week where you do not act wealthy in recklessness, but feel wealthy in identity. You do not spend what you do not have. You do not imitate extravagance. You simply inhabit ease. You breathe differently. You move differently. You interpret delays differently. You regard obstacles differently. You walk through the same streets, but from a different altitude of being. You let decisions emerge from sufficiency rather than protection. You let generosity arise without fear of depletion. You allow silence where anxiety once lived. And the nervous system learns what the intellect cannot teach, that safety does not require scarcity. Over time, this single day seeps into the others. The boundary dissolves. The state stabilizes. And then there is rest. True rest. Not sleep. Not collapse. But Sabbath. The Sabbath is the state where you no longer push. It is the posture of the soul that says the command has been issued. The mechanism is in motion. I do not intervene. Most men never allow this rest. They dig the seed up daily to see if it has grown. They shake the soil. They question the dark. They interrogate the silence. And thus they delay the very thing they long for. The Sabbath is not laziness. It is authority at ease. It is the stillness that follows certainty. It is the quiet after the decree. It is the calm that no longer needs reassurance. To enter this Sabbath state is to withdraw attention from the means and rest exclusively in the end. The end alone has creative magnetism. The means are not your business. You do not inform a river how to reach the sea. You choose the sea. These practices, taken together, are not tools for manipulation. They are garments for identity. You are not performing rites. You are becoming something, and the world does not change for rituals. It changes for states. If you persist in these practices, not as chores, but as self-recognition, the transformation will not feel violent. It will feel inevitable. You will one day notice that the old anxieties no longer visit, that the old calculations no longer intrude, that the old fear no longer speaks with authority, and only later, perhaps suddenly, you will see the outer figures shift and realize that the change occurred long before you observed it. For the world never leads. It always follows. And when it follows, it does so with precision. There came to me a man whose life, by all outer measures, appeared defeated, not wounded, not struggling, but finished. His debts were not numbers anymore. They had become a personality that followed him from room to room. Every letter carried threat. Every knock on the door carried dread. His nights were not nights. They were negotiations with fear. He did not come to ask how to make money. He came to ask how to escape himself. And I said to him something that first sounded like cruelty. I said, "You are not trapped by debt. You are trapped by the man who believes he deserves to carry it." He told me the numbers. I did not listen. He told me the history. I did not discuss it. I asked only one question. If none of this existed, who would you be? And he could not answer. That silence told me everything. For when a man cannot imagine himself free, he has already imprisoned himself without walls. I instructed him not to seek money, not to seek rescue, not to seek forgiveness from life. I instructed him to seek identity. I told him to go home and that very night lie down, not as a debtor trying to escape, but as a free man who had already escaped. Not in fantasy, not in hope. In fact, he was to feel the absence of pressure, the unfamiliar quiet in the chest where dread had lived for years. He was to let his muscles soften as though the burden had already been lifted. He was to fall asleep, not asking how will I survive, but resting in the assumption it is over. The first night he failed. The old terror seized his breath. The old calculations attacked his thoughts. The familiar music of panic rose in his chest. But he returned the second night, and the third, and the fourth, and slowly, like frost melting without announcement, the inner tyranny began to loosen. By the second week, something strange occurred. The outer world did not change. The letters still came. The demands still arrived. The numbers were still unmoved. Yet the man himself began to move differently through his days. He walked more slowly. He listened more deeply. He no longer rehearsed arguments in his head. Not because the problems were gone, but because the identity that fed them was weakening. He had stopped being a prisoner in rehearsal. Then something more subtle happened. His sleep changed. Not longer, not heavier, but cleaner. It was as though the night no longer needed to prepare him for battle. By the fourth week, he told me something quietly, almost in embarrassment. The problem still exists, but it feels unreal. That was the moment I knew it was finished. For when a condition feels unreal, it has already lost jurisdiction. The outer world did not hurry. It never does. But the inner shift was complete. And then, without trumpet or warning, the bridge formed. Not through effort, not through pleading, not through strategy. A relative who had not spoken to him in years reached out, not with sympathy, with opportunity. A conversation that should have gone nowhere opened a door that should not have existed. A business arrangement that required nothing from his past identity and everything from his new one took form with such smoothness that even he mistrusted it. And then the final movement came, so simple it offended the mind that had been trained to struggle. A settlement, not total, not dramatic, just enough. Then another, and another, until the thing that once ruled his sleep became a memory without teeth. When he came back to me, his voice had no triumph in it, only quiet astonishment. He did not ask why it worked. He said only, I am not the man who needed it to work anymore. That is the true miracle. The man did not escape debt. The man escaped the self that required debt as a mirror. And when that mirror was no longer needed, it fell away. This is the pattern of all great transformations. The world never changes first. The identity always changes first. And when the identity shifts, the world rearranges not as a reward, but as obedience. Most men wait for permission before they become free. But permission is issued only after identity has already left the prison. You do not become free because the world allows it. The world allows it because you already became free. This is why the man who waits for proof never moves. And the man who moves never needs proof. The seeming impossibility is not pierced by force. It is dissolved by irrelevance. When the old self dies, the old problem loses its audience. And with no audience, it cannot continue the performance. What the world calls luck is simply the echo of an internal verdict already passed. What the world calls chance is merely the visible edge of an invisible assumption that has matured. The universe, as men call it, does not test you. It follows you. Not your words, not your wishes, not your pain, but your settled state. You are not rewarded according to what you suffer. You are answered according to what you assume. And now I will tell you something only softly, because it is the most dangerous truth of all. You do not change by effort. You change by permission. The moment you permit yourself to no longer be the one who suffers, the suffering loses its anchor. The moment you permit yourself to be the man who is finished with waiting, waiting collapses. The moment you permit yourself to be wealthy in consciousness, money becomes incidental. This is why so many fail after learning the law. They do not fail because the law is weak. They fail because they will not leave the identity that needs the old story. Poverty becomes familiar. Struggle becomes language. Fear becomes companion. And many prefer familiar chains to unfamiliar wings. But you, if you are still listening, you are not among them. For the man who hears and does not turn away has already begun to change. The identity is already loosening. The old gravity is already weakening. And soon, perhaps sooner than you expect, you will notice that what once crushed you no longer has weight. And only then will the outer transformation feel natural, not as miracle, but as correction. For the world was never meant to sit above you. It was always meant to follow. And now, as a final whisper, before silence takes you, I tell you this: you do not need to become worthy. You need only to stop pretending that you are not. You do not need to earn abundance. You need only to stop resisting identity. You do not need to chase freedom. You need only to stop kneeling before the illusion of captivity. The man who was buried in debt did not become powerful when the money appeared. He became powerful when he no longer needed to be rescued. That was the true inheritance. The money was merely the echo. And now, my friend, if this truth has reached you, not as sound, but as recognition, then your transformation has already begun. Do not look for thunder. Look for quiet. Do not wait for fireworks. Watch for the soft collapse of fear. For when fear leaves without drama, the kingdom is already near, and it will come to you not as invasion, but as remembrance. And now, my friend, we come to the quiet conclusion, not the end. For there is no end to awakening, but the settling of a truth that no outer event can either give you or take from you. You did not arrive here by accident. No man ever stumbles into revelation. He is led by a hunger older than memory. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. Not because circumstances have surrendered yet, but because you have. You are no longer a beggar at the door of life. Not because the door has opened, but because you have remembered you built the house. You are no longer a pursuer of wealth. Not because wealth has arrived, but because pursuit has fallen away. You no longer kneel. You no longer negotiate. You no longer whisper requests into the dark. You stand. You assume. You decree. And in the quiet dignity of that inner standing, the world rearranges itself not as a favor, but as function. For reality does not reward. Reality obeys. You have spent a lifetime reacting to numbers, reacting to opinions, reacting to delays, reacting to fear, reacting to what appears. Reaction built the old world. Assumption builds the new. Reaction is the language of the sleeper. Assumption is the language of the awakened. From this moment, when an image of lack appears before you, you will not fight it. You will not argue with it. You will not panic. You will simply remember who is looking, and what you remember, you become. And what you become, the world must repeat. You will no longer ask, what will happen to me? For you will finally know what happens to me is what I assume. This is not arrogance. Arrogance belongs to the small self, trying to feel large. This is authority, and authority belongs only to being, to the quiet I am that has never needed permission. You were trained to await approval from employers, approval from opportunity, approval from numbers, approval from other men. But creation does not wait for approval. Creation waits only for instruction, and instruction is issued silently from state. Your state is now the command. Your feeling is now the law. Your inner verdict is now the court. No voice outside you will ever outrank the voice within you again. And this is why I say this to you now, with the softest certainty. You do not need to convince the world. You only need to be convinced. You do not need to win arguments. You only need to persist in assumption. You do not need to chase proof. Proof chases settled identity. You are no longer the one who hopes wealth will come. You are the one who knows the world must answer the tone you now carry. You have stepped out of the river of reaction, and the moment you step out of the river, the current loses you. The waters rush on, but they no longer carry your name. From now on, you choose what moves you, and you choose from condition, not from fear. When silence appears in moments where panic once lived, you will know the transformation is real. When you notice that numbers no longer grip your breath, you will know the old throne has collapsed. When you feel no urgency to prove anything to anyone, you will know you have crossed the invisible border. This is not confidence learned. This is identity remembered. And now hear this clearly, not as a metaphor, not as poetry, not as suggestion, but as law. Your bank account is listening, not to your spoken wishes, not to your affirmations of hope, not to your moments of enthusiasm. It is listening to your settled identity. It listens when you stand in fear. It listens when you stand in fear. It listens when you stand in certainty. It listens when you strategize. It listens when you assume. It listens day and night. It listens when you sleep. It listens when you breathe. It listens whether you believe in it or not. It listens because it is not an external object. It is consciousness in numeric costume. It is a mirror that cannot disobey its source. And now that the source has shifted, the reflection must follow, not as miracle, not as reward, not as surprise, but as inevitability. Do not rush the reflection. Still waters carry the deepest changes. Do not hunt manifestation. Hunting implies distance. You manifest by remaining faithful to the state you have now entered, by remaining unmoved when echoes of the old world flicker past. They are not signs of failure. They are the fading after image of a projector that has already been turned off. Let the image finish dissolving. The screen is now blank, and the next picture will be painted by the one who knows he is holding the brush. From now on, your life will no longer be explained by history. It will be explained by identity. From now on, you will not ask where help will come from. You will ask only what you are being. From now on, the question will never be, will it happen? But only, who am I being while it happens? And if you answer that question as wealth, as dignity, as sufficiency, as authority, the world has no council that can override it. For creation is not democratic. It answers only to being. And so I do not release you to chase. I release you to remain. Remain in the state now forming itself within you. Remain when doubt tries to revisit. Remain when memory tries to revisit. Remain when memory tries to reclaim you. Remain when the old self knocks. You are not cruel for refusing the door. You are faithful to the identity you now wear. And if the outer world seems slow to bow, do not mistake stillness for resistance. Mountains do not rush when they move. Oceans do not announce when they shift. Continents do not tremble when they drift, but all move. And so will your world, in its season, in its way, in its order. You will not command with force. You will command with presence. You will not demand. You will assume. You will not beg life. You will instruct it by being. And this is the final truth I leave with you. You were never meant to survive life. You were meant to author it. You were never meant to outrun fear. You were meant to outgrow it. You were never meant to fight circumstances. You were meant to out-identify them. Now go, not with effort, not with anxiety, not with desperation, but with the quiet posture of one who has already taken his seat. The world will adjust. It always does, for it has no choice. It never did. And as you move forward now in the still authority of your being, remember only this: you are not waiting for wealth. Wealth is waiting for your consistency. You are not waiting for permission. Permission has already been issued. You are not waiting for proof. Proof is already forming. You have crossed the invisible threshold. You are no longer asking life who you are. Life is now asking you, and it will become whatever you answer with your state. Your bank account is listening, and at last, so is the world.